There comes a moment in life when the noise quiets down. The world may still be spinning, the clock still ticking, and yet, somewhere inside you, something stops. A stillness you didn't expect, a silence that isn't empty, but alive. And in that silence, a strange question begins to echo. If I'm not all the roles I've been playing, then who am I? Really, you might be sitting alone in a quiet room, or waking up at 3 a.m. with a heart that feels too heavy for your chest. Maybe it's after a loss, or simply a pause, a space between two chapters of your life. Whatever brought you here, it wasn't an accident. There's a reason you're listening to this. Something inside you, a quiet knowing, is starting to stir. You've spent so many years being strong for others, fulfilling expectations, doing what needed to be done. But beneath all that, there's a part of you still waiting to be seen, not the performer, not the parent, the spouse, the worker, the real you. And here's the mystery. To find that self, you must enter the one place the world teaches us to avoid: solitude. Not loneliness, but the sacred silence where the truth lives. This is not a teaching, it's a remembering, a homecoming. So come, let us walk slowly into that silence together, because sometimes the only way to truly live is to let everything else fall away first. And what you'll find there may change everything. Part 1. The silence that isn't empty. Have you ever sat in silence so deep? It almost felt alive, a quiet so thick, it wrapped around you like fog. Not frightening, but unfamiliar, as if something ancient was waiting inside it. There is a kind of silence that's more than the absence of sound. It arrives like the hush of snowfall at dawn, covering everything familiar in a stillness that is both unsettling and sacred. For many of us, silence used to mean loneliness, an empty room, a life once filled, now hollow. But the kind of silence we speak of here is different. It's not the silence of being alone, but of finally being with yourself, without noise, without roles, without needing to be anyone at all. It's the first gate to a deeper solitude, and perhaps to a deeper truth. In the Zen tradition, there's a quiet tale of a monk named Ryakan, a man who lived alone in a small hut, nestled deep in the mountains. He owned nothing, desired little, and spent his days walking slowly beneath pine trees, writing poems to the moon. One evening, a thief broke into his hut, only to find it bare. Ryakan returned and said gently, "You have come a long way to visit me. You should not leave empty-handed." And with that, he removed his robe and handed it to the thief. As the thief stumbled away into the night, Ryakan sat naked by the window, gazing at the moon, and whispered, "If only I could give him this beautiful moon." What kind of person, we wonder, meets a thief with kindness and then gives away even the last thing he owns? And yet, in that silence of the mountains, far from the eyes of society, Ryakan had come to know something we often miss. When you're not clinging to what defines you, what remains is freedom. But let's pause here, because this is where the loop of longing begins. Most of us have never been taught to welcome silence. In fact, we were trained to avoid it. From the moment we were old enough to feel restless, the world handed us noise, conversations, calendars, distractions, and endless roles to play. So when life finally slows, perhaps in the quiet of retirement or after a loss, we may suddenly feel a strange ache we can't quite name. Something feels missing. But what? The Buddha once said, "The root of suffering is attachment." But it's not only attachment to people or possessions. Sometimes it's attachment to noise, to identity, to the constant hum that drowns out the quiet voice within. So here's the deeper question. When the world outside falls silent, what do you hear? And more importantly, who do you meet? It's not an easy encounter. This meeting with the self, it's like entering a room you've always walked past, but never dared to open. And in that room, the air is still, the mirrors are clear, and the only reflection is yours, not the you who smiles for others, but the one who watches behind the eyes. Some find this silence haunting, others healing, but either way, it is honest, and it is often the very beginning of awakening. In Zen, they speak of Kensho, a moment of seeing into one's true nature, and more often than not, that seeing doesn't come in grand ceremonies or dazzling revelations. It comes in silence, in a breath, in the quiet realization that you are not the roles you've played, nor the thoughts that swirl inside you. You are something far simpler and far more vast. And yet, the silence has only just begun to whisper. What happens when the masks we wear begin to fall away, not just in public, but within our own hearts? That's where we'll go in the next part, because the moment the world's gaze disappears, the real face begins to emerge. Shall we continue? Part 2. The mask that forgot it was a mask. What if the person you've been all your life isn't really you? And what if solitude isn't isolation, but the doorway to remembering who you were before the world told you who to be? In the stillness we spoke of, something remarkable begins to happen. Like a mirror fogged by breath slowly clearing, we start to see the outlines of a self that feels strangely unfamiliar, not because it's new, but because it has been hidden under layers for so long. These layers aren't bad, nor are they false. They were simply built to protect, to adapt, to be accepted. But in silence, those layers loosen. There's an old Buddhist story about a young man who came to a wise Zen master, carrying great sorrow in his heart. "Master," he said, "I feel lost. I've done everything my family expected of me. I've worked hard, achieved success, and yet there's an emptiness I can't explain. Who am I truly?" The master looked at him with kind eyes and replied, "Sit quietly by the river for 7 days. Let the world forget you, and then tell me who remains." The young man obeyed, though reluctantly. Each day by the river, without his phone, without his schedule, without anyone calling his name, he watched the water flow, and with each passing hour, something within him stirred. He cried, he laughed, he remembered. And on the 7th day, when the master returned, the young man stood up and whispered, "I think I met someone. Someone I used to know before I became what others needed me to be." This is what solitude does, not as punishment, but as purification. The Buddha taught, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." In the silence of being alone, we begin to hear that one true word, the sound of the self breathing beneath all our performances. But why do we fear this unveiling? Because the persona, a term Buddhist thought might describe as the conditioned self, is comfortable. It has a role, a name, a history. It knows how to be liked. It avoids conflict. It's the self we've rehearsed for decades. But beneath it lies something raw and unshaped, something the ego cannot control, the true self. And here's the paradox. The moment we begin to shed the persona, it can feel like we're falling apart, like we're dissolving into something shapeless. And yet, it's in this very moment that we become most real. There's a Zen image of a cracked bowl. In the West, we might throw it away. But in the East, especially in Japanese Zen, there is kintsugi, the art of filling the cracks with gold. The bowl becomes more beautiful, not despite its brokenness, but because of it. Likewise, when the social masks fall and we see the awkward, aging, confused parts of ourselves, we often recoil. But what if those cracks are the places where the light enters? What if your forgotten self, long hidden beneath the roles you've played, as spouse, parent, employee, caretaker, is not lost, but simply waiting to be remembered? So ask yourself gently, who am I when I stop trying to impress? Who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when I let the mask fall? In solitude, there is no audience, no applause, no approval to win. And that is the blessing, because in the absence of the world's gaze, we are finally free to look within. But this is only the beginning. Once the old identity begins to fall away, what remains is something even more mysterious. A space of not knowing, a vast inner sky, where nothing is defined yet, but everything is possible. What lies beyond the mask, when even the mirror is gone? That is where we'll go next. Shall we continue? Part 3. The Creative Void, where the old self dies and the new cannot yet speak. Have you ever stood at the edge of change, where you no longer feel like the person you once were, but have no idea who you're becoming? It's like standing between two lives, in a place that feels empty, and yet somehow full of something you can't yet name. There is a place on the inner journey that feels like nothingness, not the peaceful kind, but the disorienting kind, like drifting in a vast fog, where every direction looks the same and no voice calls your name. It's what the Zen masters sometimes called the Valley of Shadows, where all our past roles, beliefs, and stories have fallen silent. But the new form has not yet risen, and it's here in this creative void that true transformation begins, but not without discomfort. There's an ancient Zen story about a monk who, seeking enlightenment, left his monastery to wander alone in the wilderness. For months, he meditated in the woods, waiting for a sign, a revelation. One winter morning, he sat in the snow for hours, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Nothing is happening," he cried. "I am no one. I am lost." Just then, a raven cawed from a tree above, startling him. In that jarring sound he awoke, not because it gave him answers, but because it shattered the need for them. He laughed and whispered, "Even nothing is something." That moment, the awakening to what is, instead of what should be, is the gift of the void. But many turn away before that gift is opened. Why? Because we've been taught that being in between is a failure. That uncertainty means we're lost. That not knowing who we are is something to fix, and quickly. So we grasp for identity. We reach for distraction. We look for something to fill the silence, to anchor the mind. But as the Buddha taught, you only lose what you cling to, and in the void, clinging becomes suffering. This in-between state can feel like dying, and in a way it is. The ego, that familiar voice always narrating our lives, begins to lose its grip. The old me, the achiever, the caretaker, the strong one, the needed one, has quietly faded into the background. But what has replaced it? Nothing yet. And that emptiness can be terrifying. In Buddhist tradition, this is likened to shunyata, the great emptiness. But emptiness in Buddhism is not a void of despair. It's the openness from which all things arise. It's the space before the flower blooms, the silence before the music begins, the breath before the next word is spoken. It's potential. So instead of fleeing this space, what if we honored it? What if we treated it like fertile soil, dark and quiet? Yes, but rich with unseen seeds. What if we simply allowed ourselves to be there, not fixing, not rushing, but resting and waiting? There's a soft truth here, one that only reveals itself in stillness. Sometimes, the greatest shifts in our lives don't come from doing more. They come from unbecoming, from letting go of what no longer fits, from standing in the unknown long enough for something deeper to take shape. In this way, the creative void is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It is not the end of your story, but the page before the next chapter begins. But, and here's the turn, once we accept the void, we must ask, what arises from it? What new voice begins to whisper from the silence? What self begins to form when no one is molding it, but the truth within you? That's what we'll explore in the next part, because after the stillness comes the stirring. Shall we continue? Part 4. Meeting the stranger within, the shadows that shape us. Have you ever caught a glimpse of yourself, not in the mirror, but in a sudden emotion, a forgotten memory, or a reaction you couldn't explain, and wondered, who was that? In solitude, these hidden parts come knocking. When the persona dissolves and the creative void stretches open before us, we don't always meet peace and clarity. More often, we meet a stranger, someone who has lived quietly inside us, watching, waiting, sometimes gentle, sometimes wild, sometimes wounded, but always real. The Buddha once said, "It is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles." But what if the self we must conquer is not an enemy, but an unfamiliar friend? There's a Zen parable about a warrior who, while meditating alone in a mountain cave, began to feel haunted by visions, fierce animals, angry faces, and mocking voices. At first he fought them, tried to ignore them, shouted into the dark, but they would not leave. One night, exhausted, he sat in stillness and whispered, "If you're here, then come, show me what you want me to see." And in that moment, the shadows melted, revealing not demons but memories of pain he had hidden, desires he had shamed, parts of himself he had disowned. He wept for them, and with them. And from that night on, the cave no longer felt haunted. It felt like home. In Buddhism, this is the territory of the kleshas, the mental afflictions, anger, attachment, pride, jealousy, ignorance, not to be denied or destroyed, but to be understood. Because what we repress does not vanish. It waits, and often it guides our lives from the shadows. Solitude, deep, honest solitude, is like turning the light inward, and in that light, the parts of ourselves we've hidden from come forward, the jealous sibling, the child who felt unseen, the voice that resents, that grieves, that longs. And yet, these are not flaws, they are fragments, they are stories that never got told. And like all stories, they seek to be heard, not judged. The Buddha didn't speak of perfection, he spoke of awakening, and awakening is messy, human, and often uncomfortable. He said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." But the peace he spoke of is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of awareness. And so we ask, what feelings do I avoid when I'm alone? What parts of me do I deny to stay likable, or safe, or strong? What dreams have I silenced because they don't fit the image I've maintained? These are not easy questions, but they are holy ones. To face yourself fully, without shame, without escape, is an act of profound compassion. And it is in this honest witnessing that healing begins. There's a Buddhist metaphor of the lotus, a flower that blooms in muddy water, not despite the mud, but because of it. The mud feeds the roots. The darkness gives rise to light. In the same way, our shadows, our regrets, our hidden impulses, our secret longings are not stains on our path. They are the path. And as we sit with them, something miraculous happens. We begin to feel whole, not perfect, not finished, but real, alive, unafraid. And when that happens, a subtle shift takes place. The stories that once controlled us begin to loosen. The masks, the compulsions, the inner noise, they begin to fade. And what arises is not a better version of who we were, but a deeper presence of who we are. But here's the deeper mystery. When we finally feel most ourselves, something unexpected happens. We begin to feel connected to everyone. How can solitude, the great disconnector, lead us back to belonging? That is what we'll explore next. Shall we continue? Part 5. The thread of belonging. Our aloneness connects us to all things. Isn't it strange that in the deepest moments of solitude, when no one is near, when no voices call our name, we suddenly feel less alone? There is a paradox here that the thinking mind cannot explain. We step away from the world to retreat into stillness, yet somehow in that silence we begin to feel the breath of others, their joys, their sorrows, their quiet battles. It's as if, by removing ourselves from the noise, we finally tune into a frequency that has always been playing, the gentle hum of shared humanity. In Buddhist thought, there is no self that stands apart. Anatta, the doctrine of no fixed self, teaches that our identity is not a singular flame, but a weave of countless strands: parents, ancestors, teachers, strangers, trees, rivers, birdsong. And when we sit in solitude long enough, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve, revealing the intricate tapestry of life that we've always been part of. There's a Zen tale of an old woman who lived alone at the edge of the forest. People in the village thought her lonely, but she would smile and say, "I speak with the stars, I listen to the wind." One evening, as she sat by her fire, a traveler passed and asked, "Don't you miss having people to talk to?" She looked at him gently and said, "But I hear their hearts in the silence. Even when I am alone, I am not separate." This story may feel poetic, but its truth is deeply real. When the surface mind quiets, the deeper mind awakens. We begin to sense that our suffering is not just ours. Our longing is not unique. Our questions, am I enough? Will I be remembered? What truly matters? These are not private burdens. They are ancient melodies passed down through generations, sung quietly in every soul. The Buddha once said, "As a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so, let one cultivate a boundless love toward all beings." This kind of love, metta, does not arise from effort. It arises naturally when the walls between self and other begin to fade, and that often happens in solitude. Because when there is no one to impress, no role to maintain, we come face to face with the raw humanness that lives in all of us. The ache to be seen, the grief of impermanence, the quiet resilience of waking up one more morning. In solitude, our pain becomes less personal. It becomes sacred, shared, and strangely, this knowing brings comfort. You may wonder, how can I belong if I am not with anyone? But belonging is not always about being with others. Sometimes it's about remembering that we are others, that within us lives every story: the child abandoned, the elder remembered, the seeker lost in the forest, the monk beneath the Bodhi tree. And through this recognition, we soften. The Zen master Dogen wrote, "To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be awakened by all things." In this forgetting, not erasure, but loosening, we begin to see clearly: the bird's call, the autumn leaf, the wrinkled hands of a stranger, all of it reflections, all of it reminders. And so, strangely, the further we go into ourselves, the closer we get to everything. But this closeness opens another door, one we often fear to face. Because to truly see life is to feel its impermanence, its fragility, its ending. So what happens when the silence not only connects us to life, but to death itself? That's where we go next. Shall we continue? Part 6. The silence that speaks of death and teaches us how to live. There comes a moment in deep solitude when everything becomes so quiet that you begin to hear your own impermanence. It might arrive suddenly, in the stillness of a sleepless night, or the hush between breaths during morning meditation. A moment when the body feels small, the world vast, and time no longer a gentle river but a rushing current. And in that moment, a question pierces the silence. How much longer will I be here? This is not fear talking. It's truth, the most honest whisper the soul ever hears. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. But turning toward impermanence does not mean turning toward despair. It means we finally stop pretending. It means we look life in the eye and say, I see you, fragile, beautiful, fleeting, and I will not waste you. There is a story from the Buddha's time about a woman named Kisagotami whose child died unexpectedly. She went mad with grief and ran from house to house, begging someone to bring her child back. Finally, she found the Buddha. He told her he would help, but first she must bring him a mustard seed from a house that had never known death. Eager with hope, she searched, but in every home she heard the same story. We too have lost someone. Eventually, Kisagotami returned, not with a seed, but with clarity. She had touched the great truth. Death does not visit the unlucky, it visits all. That night, she lit a candle, and with trembling hands, she placed it on her windowsill, not to keep the darkness out, but to honor it. This is what solitude can offer us, a sacred space to confront death, not as a thief, but as a teacher, not as something that takes, but something that awakens. When we strip away the noise of the world, we're left with the ticking of our own heart, the breath that enters and leaves, the fragile rhythm of a body that will one day rest for the last time. And yet, paradoxically, this awareness doesn't shrink us, it expands us. The Buddha's path is not about clinging to life, nor rushing toward death. It is about seeing clearly, compassionately. To live with death in our awareness is to begin living fully, not later, not when things settle down, now. So ask gently, if this were my last season, what would I let go of? What would I say, without fear? Whom would I forgive, finally, including myself? This is not morbid reflection, it's sacred inventory. In Zen monasteries, monks sometimes sit in meditation beside skeletons, not to frighten themselves, but to remember, this moment is precious because it will not last. A sip of tea, a bird's song, the laughter of a grandchild, even sorrow, it passes like a cloud across the moon. And isn't that the miracle, that we get to witness any of it at all? When death becomes real, so does life. And from this place, something powerful stirs, a longing not just to survive, but to create, to live not by habit, but with intention. What if, after silence shows us the truth of death, it also reveals the secret of being reborn while we're still alive? That's where we'll go next. Shall we continue? Part 7. The Self that is born in silence. Recreating who you are. What if the person you've been is only one version of who you could become? There's something extraordinary that happens in the hush that follows our surrender. After we've faced the noise, the masks, the illusions, after we've sat with grief, with impermanence, with our own raw humanity, something begins to stir, quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a seed cracking open beneath the soil, long before the green shoots rise to the surface. This is not the old self returning. This is a new beginning. In Buddhist tradition, we often speak of beginner's mind, Shu-shin, the state of openness, of curiosity, of not knowing. It is not childish ignorance. It is sacred emptiness. A clearing where something original can emerge, not imposed by society, not shaped by fear, but born from your own awakened heart. There's a Zen story of a scholar who came to visit a master. He boasted of all the scriptures he had studied, the temples he had visited, the doctrines he had mastered. The master served him tea. He poured and poured until the cup overflowed and spilled across the table. The scholar shouted, "Stop! The cup is full." The master looked at him gently and said, "Exactly. How can I show you anything unless you first empty your cup?" Solitude, when fully embraced, empties the cup. It dissolves the persona, that patchwork identity we inherited from expectations, survival, social roles. And in that sacred emptiness, we can ask, who am I truly, when no one is watching? For some, the answer comes in the form of forgotten longings, painting again after decades, writing a letter never sent, whispering prayers that once felt too vulnerable. For others, it comes as a stillness, a sense of enoughness, where nothing needs to be added, nothing fixed, just presence. As the Buddha said, just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed again and again all that we are not. This is not about abandoning life. It is about returning to it, as someone reborn from truth. It's not always a grand transformation. Often it's subtle. A shift in how you speak to yourself. A gentleness in how you listen. A courage to say no, or yes, or maybe, not because someone told you to, but because it arises naturally from within. This is the creative power of the void, the fertile emptiness that we feared at first, but now see as sacred ground. Because now, rather than being dragged along by habit or shame or performance, you begin to choose. You become the artist of your own life, not with grand gestures, but with small, deliberate acts of authenticity. You discover that to be alive is not just to breathe, but to shape your existence like a sculptor shapes stone, gently, patiently, removing what is not true, so what is essential may shine through. But this new freedom carries something precious and weighty, responsibility. Because now that you know your life is yours to shape, how will you shape it? That is the question we must sit with as we turn toward the final part of our journey. When silence hands you the chisel, what will you carve? Shall we continue? Part 8. The Sacred Responsibility of Freedom. Living as your true self. Once you've met your true self, what will you do with it? Freedom. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? But real freedom, not the kind promised by the world, but the one that arises from deep within, is not weightless. It does not float. It grounds, it roots itself in the soil of responsibility. Because once you've shed the old skin, once the masks have fallen and the illusions no longer hold sway, what remains is not just peace, but choice. And that choice is sacred. The Buddha once said, "You are your own master. You make your own future." And while that may sound like a gentle encouragement, it's also a quiet thunder, because to truly walk the path of awakening is to accept that no one else can live your life for you. Not a teacher, not a partner, not even the Buddha himself. You have looked into the void. You have listened to silence. You have met the death of who you were and stood in the birthplace of who you are becoming. Now the question is, how will you live? There's an old Zen parable of a student who asked his master, "What is the path?" The master replied, "Walk on." Confused, the student asked again, "But what is the destination?" And the master smiled. The path is the destination. In other words, your life is the practice. This freedom is not about doing whatever you want. It's about doing what is true. It's about pausing before reacting. It's about choosing presence over performance, compassion over pride, truth over comfort. Not because anyone told you to, but because your inner knowing no longer tolerates the noise. When you truly see, you cannot unsee. When you've touched stillness, you recognize when you're being swept away. And though you will still stumble, of course you will, the difference is, now you return. You return to the breath, to awareness, to the self that was never lost, only hidden. And from this home, you begin to live not by reaction, but by vow. Maybe that vow is quiet, to speak kindly to yourself, to walk slower, to say thank you more. Maybe it's big, to reconcile with an old friend, to finally create, to love again. But whatever shape it takes, it becomes the way you honor the truth you've met in silence. Because silence does not just strip away what is false, it reveals what is sacred. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha offers this: better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. And now perhaps your whole life becomes that word. A life not louder, but deeper. A presence not grand, but awake. A heart not hardened, but free. You have walked through the darkness, sat with death, discovered the seed of rebirth. And now, in your hands, rests the most human of gifts, the ability to choose how you will live the rest of your days. So I leave you with this: what will you do with this freedom? What will you do now that you are finally home? Let this question echo in the chambers of your being, not as pressure, but as promise, because the silence that once frightened you has become your truest companion. And as long as you return to it, you will never truly be lost again. May your path be gentle, your heart be vast, and your days be lived, not in fear but in reverence. The journey has just begun. Do you remember the silence we spoke of at the beginning? That stillness, not empty, but full, not frightening but deep. It's still here, gently wrapping itself around you. You've walked through the shadows of forgetting. You've peeled away the masks, layer by layer, and now you sit in the soft afterglow of something ancient, something simple, something true. Not a new identity, not a conclusion, but a space open like the sky before dawn, where the real self can finally breathe. No need to fix anything, no need to name it, just let it be. The Buddha once said, "As a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame." And maybe now you can feel a little of that solidity in you, not as a wall, but as a quiet mountain. You are not lost, you are returning, not to some distant place, but to the stillness that has always waited inside you. So if any part of this journey touched something in you, even just a flicker of recognition, let it sit with you a while, let it ripple, let it rest. And if you feel called to, share this with someone who might be standing at the edge of their own silence, someone waiting for a gentle nudge to come home. Not as advice, just as a whisper between souls, a gift passed hand to hand, like a candle, lighting the dark.